Yegor Gaidar, Collapse of an Empire, Lessons for Modern Russia. Delve into the world of the late Soviet Union as you explore the book summary of Collapse of an Empire, Lessons for Modern Russia by Yegor Gaidar. Get ready to learn about the challenges and consequences of the fall of empires, with a special focus on Russia's experiences. Understand how empire collapses can lead to a rise of authoritarianism, violence, and instability, while also highlighting the importance of resource wealth management and its potential pitfalls. This summary will take you on a journey through Russia's past while making important connections to its present and future.
Nostalgia for empires. Empires that collapsed in the 20th century still have a lingering nostalgic effect. The collapse of empires in the 20th century can be classified into two types: those with clear divisions between cities and outlying territories, and those with integrated territories. The former allowed metropolitan populations to return home when an empire collapsed. The latter, however, integrated populations of metropolitan cities and their satellites, allowing for close and intimate interactions. These close relationships meant that when empires collapsed, metropolitan populations were suddenly faced with reduced power and prestige, potentially leading to discrimination. Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires were examples of the latter type, and their collapse had particularly significant consequences on metropolitan populations. The aftermath of these events has led to nostalgia for empire, with Russia being a prime example. Its collapse has left many Russians feeling marginalized and discriminated against in new countries. This situation parallels that in German public opinion between the late 1920s and 1940. Russia, in particular, faces dangerous times again, evocative of the Hitler era, with Putin's nationalist agenda. Russia's transition and Yugoslavia's collapse. World War I saw the fall of all territorially integrated empires, except Russia. The USSR then emerged as the Tsarist Empire under a different name and political structure. Tsarist Russia harshly treated its subjects during the 19th century. However, socio-political changes in the 20th century led to new approaches that criticized the former ways as crimes against humanity. Despite Bolshevism restoring the Tsarist Empire by substituting class struggle for ethnic rivalry, the problem of internal nationalities remained. Yugoslavia, a mini-empire of several ethnic groups, prospered during the Cold War by balancing ethnic interests until Tito died, and economic issues surfaced, leading to horrific bloodshed due to appeals to nostalgia for national glory. The fragility of authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian governments lack legitimacy and resort to violence to maintain power, but their lack of checks and balances leads to instability. Totalitarian regimes are even more fragile, often relying on mythologies. The collapse of an authoritarian regime may be caused by various factors, but it does not naturally lead to a stable successor. Authoritarian regimes are built on a shaky foundation of force and violence. Machiavelli and Rousseau recognized the inherent instability of authoritarian regimes. Despite their efforts to squash dissent, public confidence erodes with the lack of checks and balances, leaving real power in the hands of a narrow elite. Notably, Mexico, Japan, and Italy exemplified this approach until they transitioned to democracy. Totalitarian regimes are even more fragile, relying on quasi-religious mythologies like the 1,000-year Reich. However, even being illegitimate, authoritarian regimes may provide public order. Unfortunately, their collapse can cause political instability that can last for centuries without a stable successor. Determining the cause of an authoritarian regime's collapse is often difficult, even for the rulers themselves, as was the case for Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the late Shah of Iran. The death of a pivotal leader, the globalization of information, ethnic rivalries, or economic factors may exacerbate instability and lead to collapse. The emergence of a stable successor is not a given, making the transition from an authoritarian regime a delicate balance. The dangers of resource wealth. The consequences of relying on resource wealth are examined through historical examples, including Spain's silver mines and the Soviet Union's dependence on oil. The author argues that such wealth can lead to a lack of public discussion and economic self-reliance, along with vulnerabilities to volatile markets. The mismanagement of resource wealth in the Soviet Union contributed to its collapse, and cautionary tales like these highlight the importance of managing it prudently. Trapped in economic limbo. The USSR faced difficult choices when faced with falling commodities prices and a drop in income. They couldn't increase non-oil exports due to their technology being uncompetitive, and each potential solution presented political and economic risks. The regime promised to keep food prices low and feed its people, but subsidies took a large share of the state budget. The economic situation deteriorated, with frequent consumer goods shortfalls and a hard currency shortage by 1989. The USSR's political leadership was trapped with no way out, as policy tools that market economies usually have were not practicable, and the regime continued to borrow, resulting in rising debt and falling credit ratings. The fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was meticulous about debt service after rejecting Tsarist debts. However, it faced fiscal problems that Western bankers grew wary of in the late 80s. The Soviet Union needed economic help but continued to hold on to Eastern Europe. Ethnic nationalism became a powerful force, and nationalist movements spread, sometimes violently. By spring of 1991, Gorbachev realized that holding the empire together with force was not possible. The empire fell in August 1991, with republics gradually removing Russian nuclear weapons and issuing their currencies. The Russian system, while making structural changes, is showing tendencies that raise future concerns.
As we wrap up our journey through the summary of Collapse of an Empire, Lessons for Modern Russia, we've seen the crucial role of the collapse of empires in shaping the modern world. From the fall of territorially integrated empires to the emergence of authoritarian regimes, history holds significant lessons for modern Russia. The volatile oil market's impact on the Soviet Union showcases the potential dangers of relying heavily on resource wealth, while the rise of ethnic nationalism as a political force signals the importance of addressing existing tensions. Lastly, falling oil prices in the 1980s reveal the need for prudent management of resources and the consideration of long-term risks. Let us be cognizant of the important lessons from history and look towards the future with a clear understanding of how empires have risen and fallen, and what it means for today's Russia.